The bell above the door rang with a tired little sound, like it had given up on announcing arrivals with any excitement. Cold air followed the man inside, clinging to his jacketless shoulders. He paused just past the threshold, breath fogging, as if bracing himself for something worse than the winter outside. His name was Daniel Mercer, though no one in the store knew that yet. He didn't look like a man with a name that carried weight. He looked like a man who counted coins before spending them. A man who checked price tags twice and still put things back. A man whose hands shook slightly, not from the cold, but from exhaustion that had settled into his bones and decided to stay. The store smelled like wool and cedar. Soft lighting warmed the racks of coats lining the walls, all neatly arranged by size and style. It was the kind of place people came to treat themselves. Daniel had come to survive the winter. He stepped forward, boots squeaking faintly on polished wood, and his eyes went straight to the clearance rack in the far corner. Not the mannequins in tailored coats. Not the mirror displays. Just the small metal rack with red tags and curled sleeves. As he walked, his mind slipped backward, uninvited. 2 years earlier, the bell had rung differently. Back then, Daniel Mercer wore a wedding ring and a pressed jacket. Back then, he held his daughter's hand with his left and his wife's with his right as they crossed a parking lot slick with rain. Back then, he laughed more easily. Emily had been 7 when the headaches started. Small at first. "Daddy, the lights are too bright," she'd said one night, rubbing her eyes. Then came the vomiting. The hospital rooms. The words that doctors spoke carefully, as if softness could blunt their meaning. By the time winter came, so did the bills. Daniel remembered the day his wife, Claire, sat on the edge of the hospital bed and whispered, "I don't think I can do this anymore." He remembered thinking she meant the fear. He hadn't realized she meant everything. She left 3 months later. She packed a suitcase and said she needed air. She promised to call. She promised to help. She promised a lot of things that turned out to be lighter than air. Emily died the following spring. The house emptied out after that. Claire didn't come back. The job Daniel had taken time off from quietly replaced him. The life he'd known folded in on itself like a cheap coat that didn't quite fit anymore. Now, years later, another winter was coming. Daniel reached the clearance rack and began flipping through jackets, his fingers slow, deliberate. He checked sizes first. Then prices. Most were still too much. One caught his eye. Dark blue. Thick enough. Plain. No fraying at the cuffs. He pulled it free and looked at the tag. $48. His chest tightened. He reached into his pocket and felt the folded bills. He already knew the total. $36 and some change. Rent was due in 5 days. Heating costs were rising. But without a jacket, the walk to work was brutal, and he couldn't afford to get sick. He draped the jacket over his arm and walked toward the counter anyway, rehearsing the question in his head. Maybe there was an extra discount. Maybe the tag was wrong. Maybe, just maybe, today would bend a little. Behind the counter stood an older man with silver hair and careful eyes. He was organizing receipts, movements precise, practiced. The kind of man who had done this for decades. Daniel cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said softly. The man looked up. "Yes." Daniel held up the jacket. "I was wondering if this is the lowest price." The man glanced at the tag. Then at Daniel. Then back at the tag. "That's clearance," he said. "Already marked down." Daniel nodded. "I see. I just thought I'd ask." There was a pause. A small one. But it stretched. The store owner's gaze lingered on Daniel's face, not in judgment, but in something else. Recognition, maybe. Or curiosity. "What's your name?" the man asked. Daniel hesitated. It was an odd question. But he answered. "Daniel. Daniel Mercer." The man's hand froze on the counter. The bell above the door rang again as another customer entered, but the sound seemed far away now. The store owner slowly straightened, eyes fixed on Daniel as if he were looking at a ghost. "Mercer," he repeated quietly. Daniel felt a flicker of unease. "Yes, sir." The store owner swallowed. And somewhere deep beneath the weight of years, a memory stirred. Chapter 2. The silence that followed Daniel's name felt heavier than the jacket in his hands. He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how exposed he felt standing there. Poor. Tired. Asking for mercy in a place that sold comfort. The store owner blinked, as if pulling himself back from somewhere far away. "I'm sorry," he said. "You said Daniel Mercer?" "Yes." The man nodded slowly. "From Pine Ridge." Daniel's brow furrowed. "I grew up near there." "Why?" The store owner stepped out from behind the counter. He was tall, though age had rounded his shoulders. He extended a hand, not as a salesman, but as a man. "My name is Harold Whitman." Daniel shook his hand automatically. "Nice to meet you." Harold's grip tightened just slightly. "You don't remember me?" Daniel studied his face. The lines. The eyes. Something tugged at the back of his mind, but it slipped away. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I don't think so." "That's all right," Harold replied. "It was a long time ago." Harold glanced at the jacket, then back at Daniel. "Who are you buying it for?" Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. "Me." Harold smiled faintly. "Cold winter." "Colder than most," Daniel said. It was the closest he came to a joke these days. Harold gestured toward a small bench near the window. "Would you sit with me for a moment?" Daniel stiffened. "I don't want to take up your time." "You're not," Harold said gently. "Please." Something in the man's voice made it difficult to refuse. They Saturday. The store hummed softly around them. Other customers browsed. A heater clicked on and off. Harold folded his hands. "Daniel Mercer. You might not remember, but when I was a much younger man, I owned a very different store. Hardware. Pine Ridge Road." Daniel's breath caught. "The winter of '98, Harold continued. "There was a storm. Bad one. Power out for days. Pipes bursting everywhere." Daniel's memories shifted, aligning. "My father," Daniel said slowly. "He was a plumber." Harold nodded. "Your father saved my store. He worked through the night. Didn't charge me overtime. Said I had kids at home and needed the business." Daniel swallowed hard. "He died that spring." "I know," Harold said quietly. "I went to the funeral." Daniel hadn't known that. Harold's eyes glistened. "Your father raised you right. I remember you, too. Teenager. Helped him carry tools. Wouldn't take money for it." Daniel looked down at his hands. "That was a long time ago." "Kindness has a long memory," Harold said. A customer approached the counter, and Harold excused himself briefly. Daniel sat frozen, heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't pity. This felt like something else. Like a door opening that he hadn't even known existed. Harold returned, holding a cup of coffee. He handed it to Daniel. "On the house," he said. Daniel shook his head. "You don't have to." "I want to." Daniel accepted it. The warmth seeped into his fingers, into places that had been numb. They talked. Not about tragedy. Not about loss. About work. About winters that felt longer than they used to. About how life had a way of shrinking and expanding without warning. When Daniel finally stood to leave, he placed the jacket on the counter. "I'll have to put it back," he said quietly. "I don't have enough." Harold didn't answer right away. He picked up the jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it in a garment bag. "Daniel," he said, meeting his eyes. "You don't owe me anything." Daniel's voice trembled. "I can't accept charity." Harold smiled, kind but firm. "This isn't charity. This is a return." He slid the bag across the counter. Daniel stared at it, tears burning unexpectedly. "I don't understand." "You will," Harold said. "Someday." Daniel left the store wearing the jacket, warmth pressing against his chest like a promise. But he didn't know yet that this kindness was only the beginning. He didn't know that the world still had one more test for him. And one more reckoning. Chapter 3. The bus was late, as usual. Daniel stood at the stop, collar pulled tight, breath steadying as snow drifted lazily from the grey sky. The jacket fit perfectly, not just in size, but in weight, in feeling, like it belonged to him in a way nothing had for a long time. He touched the sleeve, grounding himself. Work was a warehouse on the edge of town. Long hours. Little pay. No benefits. But it was honest, and it kept the lights on. Mostly. That morning, a supervisor pulled him aside. "Corporate's here," the man said. "Just keep your head down." Daniel nodded and went back to stacking boxes. An hour later, he was called into the office. 2 men sat inside. Suits. Clipboards. One woman with sharp eyes and a tablet. They barely looked at him. "Daniel Mercer," the woman said. "You've been flagged." "For what?" Daniel asked. She slid a paper across the desk. "Theft." The word hit like a slap. "That's impossible," Daniel said. "I've never." "Security footage," one of the men said flatly. "Multiple instances." Daniel stared at the paper. The dates. The times. One of them was the night he'd stayed late to cover for a coworker. "You're mistaken," Daniel said, panic rising. "I was working overtime that night. Ask." "Enough," the woman snapped. "We're terminating your employment effective immediately." Daniel's ears rang. They escorted him out. In front of everyone. Whispers followed him. Eyes avoided him. One coworker shook his head in disappointment. Another smirked. By the time Daniel reached the bus stop again, humiliation had settled deep into his chest. He didn't go home. He walked. Past familiar streets. Past the store. Harold was closing up when he saw Daniel standing there, face pale, hands shaking. "What happened?" Harold asked. Daniel tried to speak. Failed. Then the words poured out. The accusation. The firing. The shame. Harold listened without interruption. His jaw tightened. "Come inside," he said. They sat again on the bench. The same place. But the air felt different now. "This won't stand," Harold said. "I don't have proof," Daniel whispered. "They won't listen." Harold's eyes hardened with something Daniel hadn't seen before. "They will," he said. "Because I know something they don't." Chapter 4. The hearing was held in a sterile room with bad lighting and worse attitudes. Daniel sat alone at one side of the table. Across from him were representatives from the warehouse, confident and dismissive. The woman with the tablet smirked faintly. Then the door opened. Harold Whitman walked in, carrying a folder thick with documents. Behind him came a man in a tailored suit and a woman with a recorder. The warehouse representatives stiffened. "Mr. Whitman," one of them said. "What are you doing here?" Harold placed the folder on the table, providing context. He opened it. Inside were security audits, ownership records, emails. "I sold my controlling interest in that warehouse 5 years ago," Harold said calmly. "But I retained access to internal logs. Something I do annually." The woman's smirk vanished. Harold continued. "The footage you presented. Edited. Cropped. The timestamps altered." Daniel's heart pounded. The suit spoke next. "I represent Mr. Mercer, and we are prepared to file for wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress." The room shifted. By the end of the day, the truth was exposed. A manager had been skimming inventory and pinning it on expendable employees. Daniel's name had been convenient. Public apologies followed. Quiet settlements. Job offers reinstated. Daniel declined. Outside the building, Harold handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "A job," Harold said. "If you want it. Managing logistics for my stores." Daniel stared. "I don't know how to." "You'll learn," Harold said. "Someone once taught your father. Let me return the favor." Daniel accepted. Justice didn't roar. It settled. Deep. Solid. Chapter 5. 3 years later, the bell above the door rang again. This time, Daniel Mercer walked in wearing a coat he didn't check the price of. He carried himself differently now. Straighter. Lighter. The store had expanded. New locations. New staff. Harold still worked the counter some days, though he let Daniel handle most things. Daniel paused by the window, watching snow fall. Life wasn't perfect. But it was good. He had an apartment with heat. A job with purpose. A photo of Emily on his desk. A young man approached the counter, jacketless, eyes tired. "Excuse me," the man said softly. "I was wondering if this is the lowest price." Daniel smiled. Kindness had a long memory. And it always found its way home.